going
I
to.
spoke to Peter yesterday about trying to reimburse him.
I don't have anything to bang on. 7:04, I'd like to call the meeting to order. The Education and Human Services Subcommittee meeting of May 20th, 2015 at 7 p.m. in the Rice Conference Room. And just so y'all know, this meeting is being recorded. Agenda item number 1, continue review 2016 school budget and vote to approve and submit to council for ratification. Rather, that's fiscal year 2016. And I don't think we need to do any motions. At the
number of these.
have a discussion.
Yeah.
So, but just to summarize where we were last time, because I think some committee members were confused, it was kind of convoluted what we did. I wanted to read the agenda item from the last meeting we did. Regarding the school budget, it was agenda item number 4, review and approve fiscal year 2016 school budget. It goes on to say, Ms. Danton discussed the school department presentation. Discussion was held on various sections of the presentation. Southbridge is a level 4 district, and most of the budget increase is to hire staff to address programs and services needed. The town's proposed budget for the school department is $25,537,820. The school's proposed budget is $28,255,846.09, which is an increase of $2,718,026.09. Mr. Bishop asked what the effect of not receiving the requested budget would be. Ms. Danton said that if the increase is not supported, approximately 14 proposed positions would be lost. Councilor Moriarty asked that any money saved on the town side of the budget be given to the school department. A motion was made by Councilor Vecchia and seconded by Councilor Carrasco with an unfavorable recommendation to council to approve the FY16 school budget in the amount of $25 million. I don't know that this is actually corrected, because wasn't it supposed to be a favorable recommendation?
No, the first one
The
failed.
first one failed.
But no, it was moved as a favorable, but was not that.
Was that Apple's motion?
I believe it
Yeah,
was,
Apple's
yeah.
on-
Apple's motion failed. I don't even remember if it got a second.
It got a second.
It did.
Okay, but it's
The vote count here is right.
So, yeah, the vote count is right, but it should say favorable recommendation.
No, it was
No.
not good. Not favorable.
No, the motion, his motion was to make a favorable.
His motion was to
Yes.
make a favorable
Yes.
recommendation. So the minutes are incorrect.
Yes.
Okay. So a motion was made by Councilor Vecchia and seconded by Councilor Carrasco with a favorable recommendation to council to approve FY 2016 school department budget in the amount of $25,537,820. Vote by show of hands, 2 for, 5 against. That was Sean Moriarty, Amelia Pellegrin, Gus Steves, Martina Shea, and Kristen Leclerc against. A motion was made by Councilor Moriarty and seconded by Councilor Carrasco Jr. with a favorable recommendation to council to approve FY 2016 school budget in the amount of $25,537,820 plus any positive changes occurring in the overall budget will be transferred to the school budget. Vote by a show of hands, all in favor, 6-0, and Councilor Vecchia was absent for that vote. Which leaves us to where we are today. So, Mr. Town Manager, I wanted to ask if there were any positive changes occurring in the overall budget that could be transferred to the school budget.
There is presently the sum total of all the changes that have been made to the budget. I think that's the budget change memo number 9 at this point. Most of those are pretty minor in nature, but I think there's a sum total of something like $38,000. Don't hold me to that. Could be 28, could be 30, but it's in that range, which is surplus right now. Now, when I say surplus, what I mean is if you take the town manager's budget recommendation from 2 months ago, all those budgets, assuming they are as they are, the school budget is as it was, then if you take the revenues and you compare those budgets, there's a small surplus. Not included in that surplus is about $110,000 of money, which is the difference between the governor, House 1 budget, and the House of Representatives budget, and other general government aid, UGA as it's called. I'm sorry, I can't say that with a straight face because I keep thinking that song. I don't do that. But UGA is what it's called, so UGGA. The Senate budget just came out, and we actually did a little better than the House budget. We picked up a little bit of revenue, about 7,000. On top of that, 110,000 UGA. So here's what we know at this point. I only took 75%. I took 100% of the governor's filing on Chapter 78. I took 75% of the UGGA, taking a conservative posture. The House has now said the same number, the Senate said the same number, the governor said the same number. So we're going to get that number. I can tell you that pretty certainly. So if we put that into the formula, then you got about 130,000 right now. That's all sources. You do not have 10 cents beyond that, believe me. And if I am not prepared tonight to make a recommendation, about that money, but that's not really the agenda item. But if I were to recommend that, absent some other direction from the council or the subcommittee, I would probably recommend that you put the 100,000 of state aid in and take 100,000 of Casella money out. And that is because of my continuing drumbeat of we must be prepared for the advent of the loss of the Casella money in 2 years. It may go no longer than 5 years, it may not. But one thing can be said with certainty is that money will end. And we are reliant on it to the $200 million annually and $1 million of free cash annually. And that is a very bad structural revenue fall within the budget. Free cash is very cyclical. You can't rely on it. We're relying on $1 million a year. And Casella money is not cyclical. It's gonna end, period. So that's a $2 million problem in your budget. So if we can come up with another $100,000, then I would probably recommend that we take 100 out somewhere else. We took 300 out this year. We made some progress. That's not bad, considering we didn't levy taxes, new taxes, and we still managed to get 300 out. That's pretty good. So if we get another 100 out, then out of a $2 million problem you have, if you get $400,000 out, you get 20% of the problem done. That's not bad in 1 year. But probably what I'd recommend, that's just thinking off the top of my head.
Okay, so you would say the schools might be getting another $30,000 all said and done?
Not unless somebody votes it. It's not my plan. My plan is to
Well, I'm just, in terms
propose
of.
a budget that I proposed 2 months ago. I have not changed my mind on that at all. And that is the budget that will be in front of you. According to your charter, the budget that goes to the council is the town manager's recommended budget. And my recommended budget remains unchanged. It's the same budget I gave you 2 months ago.
Okay, so, our motion. Pardon?
You're referring to the 25.5 budget?
I'm sorry?
I said you're referring to the 25.5.
Yes.
So,
Yes, and understand, I don't deny that the school system needs more money. I don't disagree with that whatsoever. Nor do I disagree that the town side of the budget didn't need to have 5 positions eliminated. We need those too. But the plain and simple fact of the matter is the town budget is too big. It is non-sustainable. It must be reduced at the same time that you're trying to grow revenues, other than Casella and free cash. Because as I look at the revenue picture, I don't see a lot of robust revenue growth in future years from any particular source. So that $2 million budget problem that you got in there, you got to get at it 2 ways. You've got to continue to bring the operating budget down while you're simultaneously using what revenue growth you have to supplant those revenues for that $2 million of non-cyclical money. So it's a significant challenge, but the one way you shouldn't address it, in my opinion, is to increase town or school spending appreciably. Because to the extent you increase it this year, you cannot afford it in future years. It's impossible. I'm a finance person. That's what I've done for 40 years. That's what I do. And I'm telling you, you have a non-sustainable situation going forward. So if you give the school department more money this year, or you restore any of those positions, were you to say, hey, CFO and Mr. Manager, we want you to put that 100,000 new GGA money in there and put it in the forecast. By the way, if we don't put it in the forecast, it just drops out to free cash next year, but you still get it. But since it's not appropriated, it just drops into free cash on June 30th of 16. So, but if you said to me, put that money in there, then I would most assuredly not put it in there and suggest you spend it. I would put it in and suggest you take out some of that Casella money, offset it, because you're addressing a long-term problem. I've said this before, I know you don't want to hear it, but you pay your manager to say things that sometimes you don't want to hear. And if I could wave my magic wand, I would have you levy that $871,000 in taxes and replace 100% of that free cash. That's what I would do. Now, I know, comrade, I know, it's not gonna happen, I get it.
Want my comment?
I get it.
Now you're dreaming.
I know. And so I understand, because, you know, I look at things from the point of view of what makes financial sense. The council looks at things from a different perspective, and my job is to respect that perspective. So I respect it, and I did what the council wanted, and I think we did a good job with it. But at this late date, were you to take that small amount of money and put it into the forecast, then to my way of thinking, you should not be spending it. Because if you spend another 100,000, you just made your problem 100,000 worse. You didn't make it better, you just made it 100,000 worse. So, that's the answer to the question.
Okay, Gus?
To follow up on that, so if we were to do something like that, and then basically stockpile Casella royalties money, or for that matter, stabilization funds or whatever, in the long run, what do we end up doing with that money? Where does that go?
I would love it if in 5 years you had a problem and that you would stockpile so much Casella money that you didn't know what to do with it. But here's the reality. Right now, upstairs is a capital budget report, which is highly complex. It's been an enormous amount of work for the last 4 weeks to pull it together. And what you're going to see is that in the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, they tell me, we have badly neglected our capital needs. We've not replaced vehicles. We've not done building maintenance. Last year, we had no capital budget, 0. The year before, we had about 75,000. The year before that, about 75. And the 2 years before that, nobody seems to know completely accurately what they said was very small. Now, here's what I can tell you. You've got,
It just wasn't part of a formal capital budget, that's all, that's what I'm saying.
and here's what I can tell you. You've got $333 million in fixed assets and buildings. And that might be a little low. You've probably got somewhere around, in rolling stock, I will bet you've got somewhere around another $100 million there, maybe a little shy of that. So you might have about $0.4 billion in capital assets. Now that doesn't include a lot of sewer, because those are enterprise funds, but you've got an enormous asset value right there. If you take a depreciation schedule, in other words, how long is the life of those trucks and those buildings, then they have very definite lives. If you don't put money aside to refund those things, to repair them, maintain them, then what ends up happening is every 30, 40 years, and Massachusetts is famous for this, we're not alone, but we neglected our school facilities. You know, most of them were built in the 50s, we didn't take care of them, and so along came SBAB and the awareness a few years ago that we were going to have to spend billions of dollars replacing all of our schools, and so we started doing that. Well, that's just the school part of it, because at the same time, we haven't been doing anything in municipal buildings either. If you keep going down this road, then in addition to the liabilities you already are facing, the structural revenue deficits in the budget, you have an additional problem in that all these rolling and fixed assets are not getting repaired and replaced, and that's just getting worse. Because the one thing we all know, you don't fix the hole in the roof, the damage gets worse and the cost gets higher. You don't fix the car, the damage gets worse and the cost gets higher. The car gets more expensive. So we can't solve our capital problems by neglecting them. So I've given you a capital budget. It's going to dip into your reserves, but not a lot. I think this is a pretty good formula to come up with. So right now you're sitting on probably about 4 or 5 million in reserves.
How much of that capital budget is designated for schools? This is what we're talking about.
Can't tell you off the top of my head because I only got 3 requests. I got a request for a computer system for the elementary schools, a request for a bunch of computer workbooks, and a request for some architectural services for Cole Lab. Take a look at whether stay there, sell it, rehab it, whatever.
Could some of their like priority needs be considered capital items?
Some of what?
Like, for example, like, I know one of the things that they listed as one of their top priority needs was the science curriculum work over the next 2 years. That's a big ticket item that be considered a capital item.
Curriculum, no, capital items are fixed assets, rolling stock, things like that, not program. No. Typically, we don't have a capital definition, but typically 5 to 10,000 minimum and a useful life of 5 to 10 years. That's a typical capital definition. What is versus what isn't.
Because the curriculum costs are.
So here's what's happening. So we're gonna have to go into some of those reserves and pull them out, and do some spending on some of this stuff that we've been neglecting. At the same time, some money comes in. So we get a couple of million a year from landfill royalties. About $1 million of that goes right to the operating budget. And if we get as much as another $1 million, then that goes right into landfill royalties. So we're gonna take a bunch out this year, and then hopefully we're gonna replace a bunch. So next year, net is still sitting at about 1.8, 1.9 million in landfill royalties. You got a couple $1 million in stabilization. I'm not touching that. That's all staying there. The CFO, Karen Harnois, told me that there would be violence if I touched that. We did do a significant amount of spending with a bond, about a $900,000 bond. Now, that doesn't cost you anything this year, but next year that's going to cost you a chunk of money, and we're just computing the bond, debt service on the bond next year. Some of that 871 that we didn't levy this year, you're going to have to levy next year to pay the bond, because that bond debt service goes into the budget. Might be 120,000. But you're going to give yourselves a big boost by being able to do a lot of capital spending this year. The other reserves, free cash is basically what's left over once you close the books on everything. Absolutely unpredictable until we close the books, which won't happen for 7, 8, 9 weeks now. And then we give you a rough idea. But free cash is a roller coaster. If you look at the 10-year history, it's been as low as almost zero, which is very dangerous. And it's been as high as well over, approached a couple of million. So, and you've got a few other reserves. Now, some of those other reserves we're hoping we'll feed them, we'll continue to feed them, and they'll grow a little bit to replace some of what we're taking out this year. But you've got to manage them very carefully. It is not the case that you're going to get a massive amount of money from landfill royalties, to help with the future, if we're taking $1 million of that a year and spending it on wages and salaries and expenses, which is what we're doing right now.
Okay, so just to be clear, so despite the way we voted our motion at the last meeting, you're still going to be recommending 25
That's that would be my recommendation, unless the subcommittee charts a different course, and then.
Well, I believe we already did chart a different course.
You did. However, the town manager has the flexibility to recommend the budget, which has to be what does the town manager think is in the town's best interest. Now, the council is perfectly free to take that recommendation and stand it on its head and shake it up and completely change it. You're going to have a document that's going to be very clear. So if the council decides you want to take that surplus, which is what your vote was, and put it in the school budget, then the council can vote it. But I was reacting to the fact that at the meeting that night, there were only, I think, 2 or 3 councilors voting. You get 9 councilors. So I don't know where the council is on that, and I'm not going to automatically assume, because the subcommittee voted that that reflects the will of the council. So I prepared the budget both ways. I prepared a voting budget, it's that document, I think it's called the voting budget, with that money put into the school budget, and I prepared one that not have it in there, so that we'll be ready to do whatever the council wants to do that night. The numbers will be right there and all set to go. And as far as 100,000 in UGGA, like I say, Karen's out the next couple of days, and so I'll have to wait to have that conversation with her, but, I mean, I think the 100,000 is there. I don't think there's any question whatsoever. It's just a matter of, do we want to commit it and do something with it? I'd rather see you not spend it, frankly, or take out some Casella monies, switch it.
Okay. Anything from the committee? Okay. Any non-committee members want to weigh in?
I do. Madam Chair.
Mr. Cotton?
Adding more money to the school department, how is that gonna fix the problem they have already? You know, it's just like trying to put out a fire and put gasoline on it. If you're gonna add more fuel to the fire, you never go out. And if you can't fix the problem that exists right now, adding more money will improve the situation. If they're underperforming now, because something is wrong, fix the darn thing, then ask for more money. But get to the source of the problem and fix the problem before you ask for more money. You know, if you have a problem with a car, the light goes on, if you disconnect the wire so the light will go on, it doesn't fix the problem until you get to the source of the problem. And adding more money to the problem that already exists does not make sense. And going up in front of the council and making all kind of noise and say, well, we need more money to fix this problem. Fix the darn problem, then ask for money. And otherwise, I feel it's misuse of taxpayers' money in Southbridge. Thank you.
Okay, does anybody else have anything? Go ahead.
If I could, Bill Latoy, I born, raised here in Southbridge, lived here till about 8 years ago. About 10 years ago or 11 years ago, when the town cut a significant amount of money, just like this, in the budget, didn't level fund the services. We saw the effects of that, which is where school choice started, and we just have seen the gates open and continue to flow. I just don't see anything here if we're not gonna be able to level service the budget. We're not asking, you know, if there could be a level service, at least, so that there's no reduction in positions. If you start reducing positions and you start having to take people out that are there when we're bare boned already, you're gonna see probably the same sort of thing. You're gonna see a real negative impact. And you know, as it has happened in the past. I mean, I lived through it once, I hate to live through it again. You know, there are nowhere really to cut except for people, and it's really gonna have a detrimental effect.
Okay, and just Max, for the minutes, I got a copy of, I have it somewhere, what the level service number budget would be. Yes, so can you read that number so Max has it?
Sure. They list their level service budget as $26,927,856.09.
No,
That's what they said here.
That's the needs budget.
no, that was our first request.
That's what we have, that's what we have in our
That was our
packets.
first
and
request.
That's
Our
what
level
we-
That's what we had in our packet.
That was our first request. This was our effort to get the town budget at level service, 2.6.
So this is what we were told was sent up from your office as the so-called level services budget.
That was the 2.64% per my email.
I mean, this
It
is,
said
Okay, so what does this
2.64%.
one represent?
That was our first request, back in the way long ago times. We had the original request, okay? So that was our original request. What I did is I dug out my old document and said the 2.64 is that level
So the level
service.
services budget is the 25,898,407.
Yes, sir.
okay.
Yes.
Can you read that to Max? So, Max,
He has it right
you
here.
have it?
Yeah, because it's not clear here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to be so abrupt in saying no. I guess.
Oh, it's better than we know what we're talking about.
Yes. 25,894.07.
Just kind of building up Mr. Latoy's comments. In terms of losing people and you know, 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever it was at this point, I forget, with the Prop 2.5 and 66 teachers laid off and all those sort of things, which was a, you know, $2 to $3 million budget gap as opposed to what we have now. for me, one of my concerns is we've got all the talk about the restructuring plan that was unveiled last week. So I guess through you to whether it's the super or somebody else, one question is do we have the fiscal ramifications of the proposed restructuring? And what is that? If we have we studied that yet? Do we have numbers on that?
I'm not sure that's part of this discussion.
But this is about the school's budget, and that is your school budget. I mean, so
It was, so in analyzing the school restructure, it's budget neutral at this point, with understanding that the budget environment that we're working in is difficult and challenging. The elimination of positions, the reduction of positions was done so that there was limited budgetary impact. I think the total impact is $616, but we do have some more analysis to do.
So the cuts you're referring to, are those the director of operations cuts, or are you talking about this restructuring of the middle high school? Or both?
It's a whole restructure, so it's a unified approach to solving issues that are coming out of the Southbridge Middle High School to provide both support to staff in terms of the coaching positions, to reallocate positions more effectively, reduce positions so that, for example, the academic dean positions are eliminated to create more coaches. So those are the ways that we have, I think, allowed for the budget to remain impacted very little.
And just for the sake of clarification, when you say coaches,
I mean academic coaches.
okay, I want to make that clear.
Yeah.
So how many positions are going away?
Yeah, I didn't bring that with me. I didn't realize this was going to be part of the discussion. You know, for me to say that it's budget neutral and it's $616, that's the answer to your question.
But you don't have a ballpark idea as to how many people you're talking about letting go or restructuring out?
It predominantly is creating positions with existing positions. So it is predominantly swapping.
Just because I'm struggling to wrap my head, do you have any examples?
I just gave you an example. The academic deans, those positions as academic deans are eliminated and redistributed into 3 academic coaches. So that's an example.
Okay, so an academic dean, which would be an admin position, which is paid comparable, I'm sure, to other districts, and the academic coaches, so essentially the salary difference,
Correct.
three academic coaches equals salary-wise that 1 academic dean.
2.
2, okay. But, so with this restructuring though,
Madam Chair, I really must ask if we are beyond the purview and the scope of this committee's
I would say we're getting pretty close to being off topic, so if you could wrap it up.
I would completely disagree because what we're talking about is the school's budget. This is the school's budget. We're not in a position obviously to dictate what they spend it on, but we are in a position to understand what that money's being spent on. Just as if you were to have a child in your household who you pay an allowance to, and I don't mean that in a belittling term to say that your children by any means, I want to make that clear, but you still want to know what that kid is spending his money on or her money on. So I think that, because otherwise, why do we bother coming here?
Well, I think that tonight we're discussing the final budget number and the overall impact to the budget. So, I mean, I don't want to have another 5-hour meeting.
I understand that, but the impact of that budget includes the programming that they have.
Madam
So
Chair.
for them for the school side to be able to discuss, if we don't have the money, this is going to happen, But for us to ask a question, told we can't talk about that, we're not prepared to talk about that, is
Madam Chair, that
either
just
horribly,
is totally unfair.
is
I'm
a-
gonna let him finish, and then.
But
you can have the
we're
floor.
not prepared to talk, that's totally unfair.
if that's the case, I'm not prepared to support any sort of budgetary increase for the school department.
Well, that's fine then.
Because there's just
If you
nothing
are-
to-
If it's retaliatory,
Point of order, the meeting's out of control, perhaps you.
yes, it is.
Sean, you can finish, and
Thank
then
you.
it's Mr. Abraham.
I will not speak any further.
Okay, and then Ms. Quinn, you can go after
Sure.
Sean's finished.
So, again, for me, it's all part and parcel. Just as if when the police department comes up with their budget, granted, we have direct purview over them, we still want to know what they're spending that money on. When you deal with anything, you want to know where your money is going towards. Retaliatory, it's just inquisitory is what it is. And that's the issue. I'm not gonna get into that part of it, but I just don't feel that we're in a position, the number has changed numerous times. There was a budget figure that was presented by the manager. What was relayed to council was that school administration was, I don't want, and the manager can correct me, but that administration was content with that figure, and then a week or two later, it jumped up dramatically. And now we have a looming, what I assume, and I don't know because we don't have numbers or figures or anything, a large change that may or may not occur. And to me, it's completely cart before horse. And, I don't see how there's any sort of information to base an actual intelligible decision on. That's all, thank you.
Ms. Quinn, and
I'm
then
sorry.
Mr. Carrasco.
Ms. Shea was first.
Okay, I'll do Ms. Quinn, Ms. Shea, Counselor Carrasco.
No, I promise. I said I wasn't going to, I won't.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we proposed a budget that was a needs-based budget, presented that. There was some things that happened prior to the school committee sitting and identifying the needs of the district and what the school committee wanted to put forward as a budget. But that's that 28, whatever number that you received. That was the vision that we have for the school district, what we would like to see in place in order to meet the needs of the students based on the needs of the students. Then I think at this time, whatever the number that the town votes on, which has yet to be voted, so to make determinations of where we're making cuts when we don't know what that number is a little cart before the horse as well. As well as a proposal was brought forward to the school committee last week. There has been no vote on that, so to decide who and what and how that all works and how much that's going to cost, we have, the administration is preparing a fiscal impact as to what that would mean, and the school committee has yet to vote on that. So I think tonight, what's before EHS is the town manager has a budget. You all voted if there was a surplus that would go to the school, how that would happen, if that will happen, at a vote of the town council. So I think that's kind of my 2 cents in summarizing what my understanding of this process.
Ms. Shea?
My concern is that the property values are down. The manager told us that there's no increase in our tax input, but one of the ways that you up the taxes is by having the value of your house go up. I've watched the value of my house sink over the last 10 years to the point that I'm embarrassed to say I own it. I would never get what I paid, anything out of it. But if we had, and the rumors are that you hear that it's the school system, that people don't want to move into town because of the issues with the school system, that if we start to look at our school systems in a more positive way and start to build them up, perhaps our property values would go up and therefore our tax base would go up.
Counselor Carrasco?
Yeah, I know we're all over the place in regards to trying to figure this budget out. Because truly, I said it on Monday night, the restructure is gonna cost money regardless the way you look at it. It'll either be a flip-flop or it's gonna be a serious sinkhole because of unemployment costs. If you're gonna lay an academic dean who's making top dollar and that person is not rehired or not brought back, now not only do you have to pay all their time that they've been there, all their earnings, you're gonna have to now pay unemployment costs, and we're gonna own it. So we're back to the major issue that we talked about last year. Unemployment costs were outrageous. So my major concern is, yeah, we, as a council, and I believe Mr. Town Manager can correct me, but we were under the impression that unemployment is now airports. So whatever they do, they're gonna have to adjust their budgets. Because I would hate to say, okay, yeah, let's see this happen, and then all of a sudden, like, they're coming back, oh no, we can't afford it, this is our budget, we were short, you know, we weren't even met with the level funded budget that we wanted, so now we can't afford to pay for the unemployment. So we're gonna have to pay for it. Again, these are the questions that I have, because if you're gonna do a restructure process, I would hope that that would be included. And whose idea was it for the restructure? Was it, if somebody can answer, it's kind of late to be doing a restructure process, especially when it's so close to budgets, you know, when the budget hasn't even been approved.
I understand your sentiment, although I do feel like we're getting off topic of the final budget number for tonight a little bit.
Well, then again, honestly, until these questions are answered, I'll say it publicly and I'll say it on the record. Until those questions are answered and we know answers, how are we gonna even approve a budget for the school committee? We're going to a meeting next week, next Tuesday, to vote on town, school, capital, and these questions are not answered? Listen, I'll be making a motion not to even vote for the budget until we have answers. Because are we gonna get stuck with the unemployment bill? Are we gonna get stuck later on the road with, oh, you guys didn't fund our budget, you know, because I understand, I just asked the finance director, right now, comparing the recommendation of our town manager, comparing their needs base, they're short about $361,000.
The level service.
Yeah, their level service, correct, thank you. I stand corrected. So they're short $361. I wish it was $361,000. $361,000. Okay,
Yeah.
that's their shortage figure. Okay, give or take some change. So this restructure plan, yeah, it's going to cost. Right now, it's saying 660. All right, have we calculated unemployment? You know, those are the things that scare me because unemployment was through the roof 2 or 3 years ago because of instability in the district. Again, so if we're going to continue this path, then in October you have the state coming in to do a visit at this middle high school. You do this restructure plan, again, we don't have no say over it, but it's just interesting, for lack of better words. What's going to be the final number? Because they're already short.
Okay.
The council already has voted not to raise taxes. So they know that they're, even with their level service budget, they're short $361,000. So if they continue with plans and implementations and all that jazz, is that number going to go up? Are we going to be looking at a shortfall of $1 million come September, October because of unemployment costs? Again, it's budget questions. You want to get as close to this number. Can we get an answer? Because if we're close to that number, maybe I'll say to the manager, okay, we're getting 100,000, all right, let's put half of that into the school budget, so that's 500,000. Now they're no longer short, they're no longer short. They have another 140 to play with.
I'm not sure I follow you.
The UGA, the UGGA money, the 100,000. So as a council, we say, give them half of that, 500,000. So now they're no longer short.
That's 50,000.
Excuse me, yes, sorry, my fault, I'm all over the place. You're right, so even if we give them half of that, they're still short. If we give it to all of them, they're still short. Where are we gonna go at the end of the day? Where is it gonna happen? Where are we gonna be? Is unemployment being looked at? Are those numbers are we gonna get stuck with? Because, again, we were sold as a council, because that was one of the biggest gripes with this council. The sitting council, the 9 members, or the majority, was we were all upset with the cost that unemployment was costing us. We were very upset. I think each and every one at one point has voiced concern. So, where are we? Is that being looked at? Is that gonna cost us more money? It's budget questions. Again, I'm not telling people how to run their thing, again, if we don't have those answers, I'm not gonna vote for a budget. Tell you that right now.
Okay, I'm gonna let Kevin go first, and then it's Counselor Steves and Counselor Mann.
I defer to the council, but there's something I very much want to say to all.
Well, when you were speaking, Councilor, a second ago, first thing, whether we have an issue with unemployment or any of these other things, it ultimately comes back to all of us. There is only one town budget. The split between the schools and the town is a basically fictitious split. It's all coming from the taxpayers. And ultimately, the issues, I would think that some of the unemployment concerns could be met and prevented by actually funding the school's budget.
And I heard the pin drop.
I know. However, I also understand what the sentiment of the council is.
So we're funding to continue instability, that's what you're saying?
I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that we also have to consider what the schools need. What do our kids need?
Stable environment.
I agree. But they
Mr.
also,
Crosco, please go through the chair.
I agree with you that they need a stable environment. Okay? I think everybody agrees with that, including the schools. The issue is what actually constitutes a stable environment, and we're not actually in the position of governing the schools. Right. I think we all know that. The question is, how much of what they are saying they need can they actually do without further destabilizing the schools? Are there issues in administration? Absolutely. There are probably other issues in the system as well. There have been for a decade. We all know that. Okay, we also know that there have been steps to fix them. Some are better than others. Sometimes they go 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Okay, exactly where they stand is troubling for everybody, including them. I'd like to know from the superintendent, with the difference between your level services budget and what the town manager's proposal is, what does that actually mean in terms of what the kids in the classrooms will see?
So it's my understanding that the difference in percent is our level services 2.6, the town managers is about a 0.8 increase. The difference is about $360,000, give or take roughly. It does mean positional layoffs. Our budget is predominantly people heavy. We believe in people being in front of students. That's testament to our belief that building relationships with students is key. We have limited, moving forward, resources in terms of textbooks, and that's a discussion that we have often at school committee. So when you talk about what does it means people. It will mean people. Those cuts would most likely come in all the units to spread out so that no one unit is more affected than any other.
What do you mean by that?
So custodians, maintenance, secretaries, I think much like town manager did at town hall, trying to look at combining positions if possible. We would be looking at attrition, not replacing positions, although we don't have a whole host of attrition at this point. But not filling positions is something that we also look at.
Monique?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I just want to say a couple things. First of all, I respectfully disagree with some of your points, Councilor Steves, but I do agree with Councilor Moriarty and Councilor Crosby's points in regards to the stability. The stability. I don't think there's been real stability at that school since Dr. Hamlin, to be honest with you. I have the floor, thank you. Sorry. I wasn't one of those members up there that voted not to raise the levy, not to raise taxes. I was away on a plane while all that stuff happened. So I wasn't even here for that vote. I wasn't part of that. I wasn't part of that pact where they signed, whatever. But I have been here to see what's been going on with the school. And, you know, and I believe that Councilor Moriarty and Councilor Crosby bring up some very valid points. They're asking for, but I'm not talking to you, I'm talking to the whole committee, and it's like, you're like throwing me off because it's like you're having a conversation with me. So, I mean, I agree on their points. We need some information. We don't know, there's more restructuring. Well, Christ, last year was over $600,000 in unemployment. Are we gonna have that again? Almost $1 million in unemployment? Are we gonna have that again? You know, I mean, or almost $750,000? You know, that's like, it's very disturbing to me. And it affects the kids. Unfortunately, it affects the kids. And then somebody I was talking to today said to me, you know, I was the class of 1991, we had 189 kids or something like that in our class. He said, we didn't have half the staff that school has now. And so, what's going on? What is going on? So that's all I want to say. You know, I totally agree. More information was needed tonight, and Dave wants to know very badly.
That's 6.
I want to, there's an old expression about a 500-pound gorilla in a room with 600, I don't know how many pounds the gorilla.
Big.
So it's a big puppy. There's a big gorilla in the room, and everybody knows it. And we really ought to be honest with one another. Come back to that in a second. As I like to say, I've been doing this for about 40 years, so that means 40 odd budgets I've written. And every one of those budgets had a school component and a town component. In all those instances, in all those years, town managers are not educators. We don't know about school budgets, and so we don't purport to be experts. We don't try to write school budgets. I don't spend my time analyzing school budgets, trying to decide what the proper level of the school budget should be. What I do, and what I've always done, and what I did here, was I said, here's an amount of money. The budgets, the town and the school budget have to fit in that box, because with Prop 2.5 now, everything is what's called revenue driven. You construct the box, everything got to fit in it. So when we decided what the size of the box was, and that was that exercise that we went through with the school committee and the selectmen and the councilors together one night, we talked about how big the box was. I gave you that forecast, and that was the opportunity for everybody to question it and say, well, why are you forecasting this versus that? And we talked about it, and we came to pretty much a consensus. And then, because I'm not an expert on the school budget, I said to the administration, look, we got to fit it in this thing. It can't be bigger than this. This is how big it can be. And we had to make an enormous reduction in the budget that we had constructed in the abstract. We have the revenue, remember that formula, here's the revenues, here's the budget. Well, this was a make-believe budget. All it was is, let's take everything we did last year, school and town, let's apply some percent to it, 2% is what I used, and let's see if it fits. And what we learned is it didn't fit. So we had to make a bunch of cuts. So I said to the school department, you cut 300, I'll cut $750,000. And the 300 that the school was asked to cut was take the $200,000 of unemployment expense into your budget, and we take that out of the town budget, because it had been in it, and then take $100,000 anywhere you want. And on the town side, I said I will, and I did, cut $750,000. So that was roughly double whatever it was the school had. The way it all shook out at the end, the town budget, according to the current budget, balanced budget, the town budget goes up 0.5%, the school budget goes up about 1.5. That was 1.46, whatever it is. Now, I made that decision based upon listening to council, because of your priorities, were to try to get some money over the school. And also because it was my impression that in Southbridge, given the realities of what we're dealing with here, a school system that's in distress and needs funding, that we would try to get more money into the school system of that very limited budget than we would on the town side. Further, the $200,000 cut of the $300,000 I offered to the school, 200 was in the form of, if you can take those practices which in the past have led to large unemployment expenses and correct those, because those are correctable practices, then you won't really have a $200,000 cut, you'll have a lesser cut. Sometime subsequent to that, when we were going through this budget, the first one was off at the 2.64. There had been some confusion on about 100,000, just shy of $100,000 solar credits from that solar PPA that the council did last year that had not been realized in there. So of that $665,000 difference, about 100,000 of that is already taken care of, because 100,000 of that is money that was not realized was available. So that's
short 260.
So that's presumably been put in it. So it's really about a $565,000
No, see, this was the.
gap. Yeah, I'm looking at the 216 town budget column. What I think Aaron represented is the level service budget. 25,898,407. Okay, so that's where we were. And I thought, frankly, after that night, and that was the first night you met here, and it was the budget discussion, we met, Karen, Aaron, Cheryl, and I, and we started working on trying to close that $361,000 budget gap. And right away, boom, 100 of it was gone, because that was the solar credits. We talked about taking 100,000 of the state aid, and now you can do it. So now we were down to about 161. And I thought we were well on the way toward getting that budget closed. Now, why did I do that? I did it for a simple reason, because at the end of the day, a town manager is not an expert at a school budget, so a town manager has to trust someone. So I simply made it an article of trust that I would trust my colleagues in the administration. And I would say to them, okay, that represents your level services budget. I don't know why, I don't know how, I haven't analyzed your budget. You don't want me to analyze your budget. When town managers analyze school budget, bad things happen. Because we have a different way of looking at things than educators do. So I simply took it as an article of faith, and that's how I have done it for 40 years. And it works. Now here's the gorilla that's in the room, folks. The confidence level in the numbers isn't there. That's the problem. I'm going to speak very honestly and very plainly. Last Monday night, the council took a vote, which is in my 4 decades of public service, is extraordinary. I've never seen such a vote. And I'm not saying whether it's Merited, not merited, deserved, not deserved, I happen to agree. So the perspective that I find myself in now is that I do not have the confidence in these numbers anymore. I picked 4 simple, I thought, simple indicators, which if I could see substantial progress on those indicators, I would get a level of trust in the numbers such that I would put myself in a position where I could feel responsible in recommending to the council that we try to find that $361,000. And those 4 things are simple. Show us how legal expenses are going to be reduced, because in past years they've been extraordinary. And I've now analyzed that, I know exactly what those are for, and that's all wrongful discharge, discrimination complaints, settlements paid to employees, and legal expenses to lawyers. That's what it all is. And it's been extraordinary amounts of money for 4 or 5 years now. So I said, number 1, let's talk about how we're going to not make, that's not going to happen again. Number 2, let's talk about the unemployment, because the unemployment is a manifestation of another facet of that same problem. I said, let's talk about how we're going to get that number done. What are the practices that cause that to happen, and how we're going to change that? Because those are eminently changeable factors. Number 3, let's talk about Cole School, about getting administration out of that building, because administration occupies a little part of it, but the cost of the whole complex is extraordinary, and the rents that we get don't do anything to amortize the full value of the cost of heat and light and all that. So let's make a substantive move here and show the taxpayers. And the 4th was to have the school maintenance department vacate the premises they're in, save the money on that, heating and lighting, move into the DPW, the 20 rooms. That DPW facility is bigger than the city of Cambridge. I would invite you, if you don't believe me, go to the city of Cambridge's DPW. I did it just by name, because I'm not in town. Ours is bigger than the city of Cambridge. That's an extraordinary facility we have over there. There's simply no reason whatsoever why school maintenance can't be housed there. And it would be great synchronicity of equipment sharing and all that. We're already heating that whole building. We're already paying the freight. And I think I said it, I didn't, I hope I said it. We will not charge the school to occupy it. There'll be no charge, proportionate share for heating, light, and all this. Move in there. And then we'll sell the school, and I will recommend to the council if the school is coming to give them. And we'll sell the fire building, assuming we can, because it's just that version of the clause. And if we can sell it, then I will recommend it to the council that the money be given to the school. So I thought that was a fairly comprehensive way to say, if we can make progress on these items, then I would have a confidence level that would say to me, I don't understand STEM, I don't understand teaching, I don't understand curriculum, but I do understand business. And so those are business concepts, and if we can make progress on those, then I would get a confidence level that would say, okay, I can recommend this to the council. And in the manager's recommendation, when the manager says to the council, I have this confidence, it means something to the council. At least I like to think it means something to you. Because you pay your manager to make those evaluations. So when I say to you, I don't have that confidence, I know that means something. And when I say to you, I do have that confidence, I hope it means something. But right now, I'm not saying I have that confidence, and I know it means something. And clearly the council doesn't either. And so the dilemma that we're faced with here is, how are we going to get to that level of confidence? Because I think what we're collectively doing to ourselves is we're not funding the budget, the school budget, where maybe it needs to be, but nobody believes it necessarily needs to be there. And that's the problem. I don't believe it. I don't think the council believes it. And so the problem is, after that night we all met here, and it sounded that night like we were getting close to something, an extraordinary series of events occurred. And we all know what those events are, and I don't need to go back through them. But it is the occurrence of those extraordinary events that has caused what was a fairly tenuous but growing level of confidence that night to erode to the point where we now have this vote this past night. I can't pretend to give you a suggestion for how to restore that confidence, but I can tell you, I can make two observations that I think are helpful. Number one, when confidence is lost, it's extraordinarily hard to get it back. It's just like trust. Trust is lost, it's hard to get it back. Confidence has been lost. It will be hard work to get it back. Number two, there are still those four things that are kind of sitting there on the table. And I don't know where we are on problem, but I do see this. And I think it's the thrust of Sean's question, and it certainly is on my mind. If it is the case that it is to be that a number of senior administrators are going to be asked to essentially reapply for their job, and I may be crude in the way I'm fashioning it, but I think I'm getting the gist of it, then the supposition that I have, right or wrong, and I think everybody else has, you don't do that without a reason. It would be just like me saying to all of my department heads, I want you all to reapply for your job. I would not take an extraordinary step like that unless in the back of my mind was some people aren't getting rehired. Because that's the only reason I ask them to reapply. Now, if those words come as a startling revelation to anyone in the room, then I would say to you, please, wake up, smell the coffee, because everybody knows what's going on. If that will be the case, then what that says to me is that those legal costs and those unemployment costs, we are about to go through a round of that again. And it is going to be extraordinarily costly to this community, inordinately disruptive to the education system, to the communal life of this community. It has led us, the suggestion of those events, the decisions the school committee made have led us directly to a council which has taken an extraordinary vote. This is unprecedented in my career and in my experience, and I don't know exactly what to do to suggest how to fix it, but my heart aches for you, because this should not be. Because at the end of the day, we're all us grown-ups are having these debates and these concerns. There's a whole bunch of children who are not going to get the education they deserve, and they don't get a re-go. They don't get a re-go. You know, they get 1 year as a junior in their life, and 1 year as a sophomore, and 1 year as a senior, one in the third grade. Man, some of us might get a couple of them. But everybody gets 1 year. And so while we're going through this agonizing dilemma, those kids are the ones that will pay the price, not us. I'm sorry to have waxed so long on this, and I wish at the conclusion I could give you, do this, and it will be better. I don't know what to do because I don't know. I've never gone through this before. But I know this. The school committee and the council need to talk a lot more. And frankly, from my point of view, it needs to be fundamentally understood. The council is the appropriating authority for the town of Southbridge. Like it, don't like it, it doesn't matter. They are the appropriating authority. It's just like a town meeting in the town, a city council in the city. We are a city form of government, but we're still a little town. It's a form of government. So if a member of the council wants to delve into any aspect of the budget of the school that they are the appropriating authority of, they have the right to do that. At the end of the day, well, I won't debate that because I'm quite confident. At the end of the day, the Education Reform Act, and I'll do it with anybody in this room on municipal finance. I teach it at a graduate level at Suffolk University and Bridgewater State. Anybody wants to take that on, let's go. Because I guarantee you, nobody in this room knows it like I know it, I promise you. So, you want to debate it, we'll do it. The Education Reform Act is very simple. It says the school committee runs its budget. Actually, it doesn't say that. It says the superintendent runs the budget. The school committee provides policy level direction to the superintendent, who proposes a budget to the school committee passes it, proposes that budget to the appropriate authority, who has the right to delve into anything they want, and then they pass that budget, and they give it back to the school committee, and ultimately the superintendent, and the principals in the buildings, and they run their budget, not the school committee. The education reform law is quite clear. I participated on the committee at the state level that wrote the formula, which is still in existence today, that decides how that 34-step education reform, Chapter 70 formula gets done, and how the money gets apportioned at the end of the year when you do your report. So that's reality, respectfully. So, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I can tell you right now that unless we somehow get some confidence restored, that the budget that we're looking at represents something that we can have some confidence in, I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is the council's going to react in a non-supportive way. And that's what you're going to have to live with. And then that means that perhaps, I don't know, you don't have the money that you need to do what you need to do for the kids. But that's the truth.
I'm all set. That answered everything that I needed to know.
Wait, my question would be to you, Madam Chair, the superintendent, because I need some clarification. Tom Manager points 4 points out. Does this level service budget, the 2, 5, 8, 9, whatever, does that include the anticipated unemployment cost, the 200,000? Is that number in there? Because I looked at this whole thing, and I don't see
No, there's not a line item in there. It was not part of the level service budget.
Okay, so
if we have to get down to it, we'll get to it. We just cut some positions.
so then
So that's another item in the gap. So there is $100,000 that is potential energy savings. What was not discussed is that $200,000 that will come to the town, that will come to the school committee, the schools, that will increase that gap by an estimate of say 200,000. So you're talking a negative 100,000 to that gap.
So when you say
So
it
that
wasn't,
360 becomes 460.
when you say it wasn't discussed on your end?
No, it was discussed. It's not in that level service budget.
Okay. Does it include legal fees? Does this level service budget include legal fees?
There is a budget for legal, yes.
Okay, there is. So we got legal fees covered, but not unemployment.
Right.
Madam Chair, I'd like to know why the school department cannot learn by mistakes as they did in the past. To me, if a person learns by somebody's mistake, or their own mistakes in the past, that would be one error they would make in the future, they would advance a heck of a lot faster. You know, the thing is, if you can't learn by your past mistakes, how can you advance forward? Or admit you made a mistake? The name of the game is the kids are going to be the ones that suffer at the bottom line, and Mr. Baker spoke very, very well and discussed the problem we have with the school department. Why can't they address those problems and fix them, then ask for more money? And never mind asking for more money till you fix the problem. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'd just like to address the committee members at this point. We have a couple of options in front of us. We can take no action and leave our recommendation as is to vote to do the $25,537,820 plus any positive changes overall occurring in the school budget, or we can, somebody on the prevailing side can rescind that, and we can just vote to send the $25,537,820, or we could do the level services budget of $25,898,407.49. It's up to you guys what you want to do. But in the interest of not having a 5-hour meeting, I'd like to just see what the committee wants to do, and then we can all go home.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
as we already have direction from this committee.
All those in favor?
Five in favor.
Okay.
Anybody opposed? I think there's a lot more probably to this one than we're getting voted, so.
Okay.